September 29, 1957. A tank containing 80 tons of radioactive waste explodes with the force of 70 tons of TNT in the closed Soviet city of Chelyabinsk 40. The blast sends a plume of deadly isotopes 2 kilometers into the sky, glowing like the aurora borealis against the Ural Mountains. Within hours, radioactive snow begins falling on villages below. Children run outside, laughing, catching the shimmering particles on their tongues. Mothers hang laundry beneath trees dusted with glittering powder. Farmers continue harvesting fields now blanketed in strontium-90 and cesium-137. Nobody tells them they're being poisoned. For 3 days, 270,000 people go about their lives while radiation levels spike to lethal doses. The Soviet government knows, scientists know, the military knows, but the villagers, they know nothing. When evacuation orders finally come, residents are given 2 hours to pack. No explanations, no protective equipment, just soldiers with Geiger counters marking homes with crosses, declaring entire towns dead zones. The USSR will deny this disaster exists for 32 years. They'll scrub it from history books, silence witnesses, and let the world believe Soviet nuclear power is perfectly safe. But you can't hide cancer. You can't hide birth defects. And you can't hide an entire region erased from maps. This is Kyshtym, the nuclear apocalypse that happened 29 years before Chernobyl, and how 10,000 people were sacrificed to protect Stalin's atomic secret. January 1948. Construction crews arrive in the remote Ural Mountains, 150 kilometers north of Chelyabinsk. They're building something that officially doesn't exist. Chelyabinsk 40, a closed city dedicated entirely to producing weapons-grade plutonium. The workers don't know what they're building. Most are prisoners, gulag laborers who won't ask questions or live long enough to tell stories. By 1949, the Mayak chemical combine becomes operational, 5 nuclear reactors working around the clock to fuel Stalin's atomic bomb program. The United States detonated their first nuclear weapon in 1945. The Soviets are desperate to catch up. Speed matters more than safety. Always. The reactors produce plutonium, but they also produce waste. Massive quantities of liquid radioactive waste that must be stored somewhere. Soviet engineers designed containment tanks, stainless steel cylinders buried in concrete bunkers, cooled by water systems to prevent overheating. By 1957, these tanks hold millions of gallons of some of the most toxic substances ever created. The workers at Mayak know the dangers, theoretically. They wear badges that measure radiation exposure, but those badges often malfunction or get ignored. Dosimeters scream warnings that supervisors dismiss. Production quotas must be met. The Cold War doesn't pause for safety protocols. Tank 14 sits in a concrete canyon, one of dozens storing high-level radioactive waste. Its cooling system is temperamental. Engineers notice temperature fluctuations throughout 1957, but repairs require shutting down operations. That's unacceptable. So they monitor the tank and hope the cooling system holds. It doesn't. On September 29, 1957, at approximately 4:20 p.m., the cooling system fails completely. Temperature inside Tank 14 spikes rapidly. The waste, a volatile mixture of acetate and nitrate salts, begins a runaway exothermic reaction. Within minutes, pressure builds to catastrophic levels. At 4:22 p.m., Tank 14 explodes. The explosion is massive. The concrete lid, weighing 160 tons, launches into the air like a bottle cap. It crashes down 100 meters away, shattered. The blast releases approximately 20 million curies of radioactivity, 740 petabecquerels for those counting. For context, Chernobyl released about 50 times more, but this is still catastrophic. A radioactive cloud rises 2 kilometers high, visible for miles as a glowing orange-red pillar against the evening sky. Winds carry it northeast across the southern Urals. Over the next 10 hours, radioactive particles settle across an area of 23,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of New Jersey. In the villages downwind, people notice something strange. Around midnight, a fine dust begins falling. In the darkness, it shimmers with an eerie blue-green luminescence. Children in the village of Berdianish wake their parents, pointing excitedly at the magic snow. Some run outside in their nightclothes, trying to catch the glowing flakes. In Satlikovo, a farmer watches his fields turn silver under the falling particles. His crops, ready for harvest, now sparkle like they've been dusted with diamonds. He touches the powder. It feels warm, almost alive. He doesn't know he's just absorbed a lethal dose of strontium-90. At Mayak, chaos reigns. Scientists scramble to measure the contamination. Their instruments max out immediately. The needle on one Geiger counter spins so violently it breaks. Emergency meetings convene. Military officials, scientists, and KGB officers argue in smoke-filled rooms. The debate is simple: tell the truth or maintain secrecy. The Soviet Union's entire nuclear weapons program operates from this facility. Admitting a catastrophic failure would expose the location, the scale, and the vulnerability of their atomic infrastructure to the West. It would be a propaganda disaster and a strategic revelation. The decision comes from Moscow: total information blackout. The villages will be evacuated, but residents will be told nothing about radiation. The official story will be emergency relocation for agricultural reasons. For 3 days, while soldiers plan the evacuation, 270,000 people continue their normal lives in heavily contaminated areas. October 2nd, 1957, military trucks roll into villages at dawn. Soldiers in full protective gear, masks, and gloves jump out and begin marking buildings with chalk. White crosses on doors mean contaminated, must be demolished. Red X's mean salvageable. Residents emerge from their homes confused. A lieutenant shouts through a megaphone, "You have 2 hours to pack essential belongings. You're being relocated for agricultural reorganization." No mention of radiation, no explanation of the explosion, no protective equipment offered. Families scramble to gather possessions. What do you take when you have 2 hours to leave your entire life? Photos, clothing, food, tools. Elderly residents refuse to go, clinging to their homes. Soldiers drag them forcibly onto trucks. In the village of Galikayevo, a woman demands answers. "Why are you wearing those suits if this is just about farming?" A soldier ignores her. Another villager points to the Geiger counter clicking frantically in a sergeant's hand. "What is that measuring?" The sergeant walks away without responding. Trucks haul 10,000 people from 23 villages to hastily constructed barracks 50 kilometers away. The evacuees are forbidden from returning, even to retrieve forgotten belongings. Within weeks, military crews bulldoze entire villages. Homes, schools, churches, all crushed and buried under mounds of dirt meant to contain the radiation. But thousands more people remain in the contaminated zone. The radiation spreads unevenly. Some areas are deadly. Others measure only moderately dangerous. Soviet officials decide to leave residents in acceptable risk zones rather than admit the scale of the disaster. Dr. Angelina Guskova, one of the Soviet Union's leading radiation health specialists, arrives at Mayak to assess the damage. What she finds horrifies her. Workers at the facility receive doses up to 400 rems, far above lethal thresholds. Evacuated villagers show early symptoms of acute radiation syndrome: nausea, hair loss, bleeding gums. She orders medical monitoring of the affected population, blood tests, bone marrow samples, cancer screenings. But she's instructed to never mention the word radiation in official documents. Medical records describe the condition as vegetative dystonia or asthenic syndrome, anything but the truth. For 32 years, the Soviet Union denies the Kyshtym disaster ever happened. Maps are redrawn, erasing contaminated villages from cartography. Survivors are threatened into silence by the KGB. Speaking about the evacuation or the glowing snow can result in imprisonment. The first hint to the outside world comes in 1976. Boris Medvedev, a dissident Soviet scientist who defected to Britain, publishes an article describing a massive nuclear disaster in the Urals. Western intelligence agencies are skeptical. No satellite imagery captured an explosion. No radiation spikes detected abroad. The CIA investigates but finds the evidence inconclusive. The USSR dismisses Medvedev's claims as lies from a traitor. But in the late 1980s, as Mikhail Gorbachev's glasnost policy opens Soviet society, the truth begins surfacing. Journalists visit the Urals. They find ghost towns, evacuated and decaying. They interview survivors who describe the glowing snow, the sudden evacuations. the illnesses that followed. In 1989, the Soviet government finally admits the Kyshtym disaster occurred. Official death toll, 200. Independent researchers estimate the real number is far higher. Cancer rates in the region spiked dramatically in the decades following the explosion. Birth defects, leukemia, thyroid cancer all appear at rates far above national averages. Studies later reveal that over 400,000 people were exposed to dangerous radiation levels from the Kyshtym disaster. The contaminated area, now called the East Urals radioactive trace, remains partially restricted today. Some villages were never rebuilt. Fields remain fallow, too poisoned to farm. The Mayak facility? Still operational. It continues processing nuclear materials, though under significantly improved safety standards. But the legacy of Tank 14 lingers in the soil, in the water, in the bones of those who lived through it. Kyshtym taught the world a brutal lesson. Nuclear disasters can be hidden, but their consequences cannot. The glowing snow may have stopped falling in 1957, but its poison endures, a silent testament to the cost of secrecy in the atomic age.